Good to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the June 9th meeting of the Common Council's Planning, Land Use, and Economic Development Committee meeting. Committee members present, Councilmember Tom Hoey, Councilmember Joyce Love, and myself, Councilmember Kathy Fahey, and I know Councilmember Ballerin will be joining us a few minutes late, and I'm sure Councilmember Dosche's on her way. We are here tonight to do the second installment of interviews for individuals to serve as commissioners for the Albany Commission on Municipal Internet Service. This, just as a reminder, it's a 2-year appointment. We're going to be looking for individuals who are knowledgeable of efforts to create a municipally run internet, who might have a background in finance or a background in economic development, information technology, or perhaps there's some other skills and strengths that would make one of these individuals a strong member of this commission. And again, it's 10 members total. 5 are appointed by the mayor and 5 are appointed by the council. And so before we get started, now after we do we have 4 people we're going to be interviewing tonight. And after that, we'll have a discussion. That discussion will be in executive session as to how to, what we're going to do, who we're going to select for the commission. Any questions or concerns before we get started?
Yeah, Kathy, I know that you said that after the meeting we go into executive session. Will we check out the credentials of the people before making the decision, or have they been checked out already? You know, what they, on their resume, what they said? Or do we, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Well, I think that not normally no, Tom, unless there's someone raises a specific concern.
Okay. And the other question I had is this, you know, sitting on the commission, is it paid or?
No, this is not a paid position.
Okay, thank you.
And it's like I said, it's a 2-year appointment. They will draft a preliminary report within 120 days and a final report after the preliminary within the next 150 days. And the commission will cease to exist 6 months after that report is submitted. All right, I guess we have our first, we have a few minutes actually before our first interviewee, and that person is Martin Robinson. We have him down at 5:45 p.m. He wouldn't happen to be here, would he? Yet? No? Okay, so we'll give that a couple minutes.
I'm sorry, Kathy, I just wanted to make sure you said that they're 2-year terms?
That it's a 2-year appointment, correct?
Okay.
That's right from the legislation.
I'm trying, yeah, that's what I'm trying to find because I just only see that it ceases to exist. That's what I'm just trying to pull.
You're not seeing it?
No, I don't see it. I only see the,
There's no term limits. Well, the term limits are not defined in terms of years in the legislation. It's based on the submissions and reports, right?
Okay, that could be. And I might have taken this out of the blurb, not the actual law. So if you add up 120 days for the preliminary report, and then 150 days for the final report, that's 270, 6 months after that. So what would that be?
So about just shy of like a year and a half.
Are you sure? I mean, I wouldn't have, I don't have the, let's see. I don't have the legislation. I have one, but it's not, some of the type has failed here.
I'll pull it up in 2 seconds.
If you could, that'd be great.
I have it in front of me. 1 second. Sorry. Membership terms and vacancies.
It's 42-383. It's close to 2 years, but it doesn't expressly say.
All right, well then I'll just,
A year and a half.
I'll make a reference then to the reports and that'll be more accurate.
And it'll be tightened up in the appointing resolution. So.
Okay. All right, thanks for pointing that out, JR.
Kathy, Judy's joined us, just to let you know.
Okay, Councilmember Judy Darche has joined us. Okay, Judy, we're just waiting for the arrival of our first interviewee.
Okay, thank you. That's what I figured.
I guess we didn't need that 15 minutes.
We did strongly suggest that people arrive 10 minutes before their actual meeting time.
Oh, did
So
you?
I guess,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
JR, I'm going to have to switch to phone around 6 o'clock, just to let you know, so I'll get off this. Thank you. I'm almost finished with all the sports for my son. You don't know how good it's going to feel.
What's he doing right now?
He's doing track. He plays for 3 soccer teams and taekwondo. So last track meets tomorrow, and one of the soccer teams has been, actually 2 of the soccer teams have finished. He has 1 soccer team left.
It must be travel, Tom. We always see you in the car. Okay.
Yes. Well, on Monday we were down in Saugerties, and sometimes I get a good signal, sometimes not. But I think this will all end next year. I'm not going to be able to do once we go back to our home. Either my wife does it or he won't be doing it.
What? What grade is he in?
He's in 8th grade, and yesterday was his 14th birthday. So.
Oh. That's nice.
It's sad. I love it when they're young. When they get older, it's like they're independent.
Yep, they sure are. So what travel team is this?
Bethlehem.
Oh, okay.
Our first candidate is here.
All right. Can you let him in, please? Oh, welcome, Mr. Robinson.
Give him 1 second. He's still connecting.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Hello, Mr. Robinson.
Oh, hello, Council Member Fahey.
Thank you so much for coming tonight and your willingness to interview for a position on the Commission on municipal internet service. Just really briefly, the mission of the commission is to research the feasibility, logistics, and financing of creating a municipally run, citizen-owned high-speed internet service that will provide internet speeds greater than what private companies currently provide and ensure service will be made available to every Albany resident and business. 5 members are appointed by the mayor and 5 members will be appointed by this council. We had some interviews last week, and then tonight we have the remaining interviews, and we'll be making a decision hopefully later tonight. And then we will contact all the interviewees. So what we'd like to do is start by asking you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and also why you are interested in serving in this role. And then we'll go around and ask some questions, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions also. So go take it away, Martin.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, my name is Martin Robinson. Basically, my reasoning for joining this committee was because really for the last, few years, I've actually been, interested in, in the development of municipal internet systems. I've sort of have an experience with it actually within the city of Albany. When my family, moved to Albany when I was 14, and, just for the record, I live just outside the city right now, but, I went to high school here and such. And when I had moved here, my parents actually utilized the Albany Freenet, in 2006, actually initially to look for jobs and stuff. And, I actually see the value of it. I mean, yeah, it wasn't, useful for, going on the new YouTube at the time or, playing games and stuff. But, it definitely did help my parents get a leg up. And, now fast forward a few years later, I don't think, the Freenet is as, really reliable as it used to be, primarily because a lot more people have mobile devices and stuff. I mean, a lot more people than in 2006. And, something has to, it could probably use a bit of an upgrade and such, with, technology rising. Is there anything that it might have missed with my response or?
Well, I can bring up one thing is, you were, it was very helpful that you shared the paper that you did, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. That you
Okay.
It was on
Yes.
on municipal internet service.
Yeah, so basically, fast forward to 2005, I think, the city of Albany had, looked into that idea. It was around the time that, the city had, had a sort of a committee to look in, a task force to look into this. And, it was in that spirit that basically I kind of wrote this paper to see basically what other, local governments were doing. And, ultimately, I've seen, really 3 ways people have, tried to, expand and improve internet service. The first being to regulate it. The second to, subsidize existing services. And, the third way, to basically, build a new system. The first way, regulation, we kind of see that in action. You recently, the, state legislature and the governor signed, a new law basically, requiring all internet providers to provide a minimum service, and charge no more than $15, a month for that. And, right from the get-go, you can see the limits of that because already you have a number of providers that are, suing the government to prevent this from being imposed. So you have the real possibility of that law, possibly being, overturned in court. The second means that, I looked at in the paper was basically subsidizing services. And, ultimately, short term that, can be a cheap and effective way of expanding service and ensuring that more people have access to quality broadband. But ultimately, what you have is, companies will often try to get over with that. about a month ago, I was reading a story about, the Biden administration's FCC had basically, put in a requirement, had put in the subsidy program, giving people, $50 a month to be used toward, broadband internet service. And you have, and it was found that, you had, Verizon, one of the companies that, does provide this service in certain areas. They've been finding that what Verizon's been doing is telling people that, yes, if you're eligible for this $50 subsidy, sign up for it. But in order to get the subsidy, you have to get the highest tier service. So that's just one means of, getting over with that. And, ultimately the last solution, which, my report, had found to be the best and the most effective solution is to basically, build a, from scratch, new municipal internet service. Ultimately, this is that building out a new system is an expensive prospect. And, the numbers can be, costly, can be scary to look at a little bit, but, at the end of the day, most cities that have built this kind of service, this municipal internet service have, found it to be, very good for them and that they really dramatically increase speeds. And ultimately, it placed, the cable companies and other telecoms in check because now they had true competition. My report found that, the federal government did a study of internet providers all over the country. And they found, between 2007 and 2009, companies like Time Warner Cable, now Spectrum, were raising their prices all over the country. But they found that they weren't raising their prices in areas that had a municipal internet service because it's competition. So, so basically, I'm hoping to, kind of, learn from, the other members of, if I'm selected to be a part of this committee, to learn from the other members to see, what their thoughts are and ultimately, share my knowledge about this topic as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Now let's go around and see what other council members have questions or comments. Councilmember Hoey.
Yeah, hi, Martin. I'm very impressed with your resume. Be able to get a master's degree, it looked like a year and a half after getting your bachelor's. And I worked at UAlbany, so a little bit, very good. With the urban planning, did that ever come up like in your studies about internet and access like that? I'm just curious.
I don't think I, took a particular class on it and such, but, basically, my MPA, my concentration was in local government management and urban planning and policy. So ultimately, one of the topics I was looking into, municipal internet was, fairly new at the time. So it kind of like really just took, personal initiative, doing some of this research, by scratch to see, what worked best.
Now we've interviewed both Verizon and AT&T for the they're looking to get permission or our sign off on the 5G service, and I did bring up about what can you do for us, and of course their thing is that the FCC allows us to charge what we want. Hold on one second, Mike. I gotta close the door. Leah, I'm on meeting. Sorry. They claim that, that they really can't do much because of the FCC. And I'm thinking more of a, giving back to the community that's keeping, they're making a lot of money here. So just want to let you know, I agree with you on that we need to have more competition because they're kind of playing the same ball game together and keeping, the prices up. Anything else I should ask you? You'd be coming in as not as well. You have the technical background, but you also have the like the public affairs. So thank you. I appreciate that you. I want to thank you for applying, and I hope we can get you on. Thank you.
It's no problem. One thing I did want to say is that I think the one thing I think 5G has a great deal of promise. The only issue that I have with it is basically, a lot of, 5G basically involves like, broadcasting out signals and stuff. And, a lot of those, a lot of that spectrum was bought up by a lot of those telecoms like, AT&T and Verizon and stuff, because they had bought what used to be used for analog TV service. They basically now are reserving that for 5G. And, the only concern that I have with that is, while I think it'll, be a cheap way of, expanding internet access, I do believe that, because, Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T have brought up a good portion of that spectrum, ultimately they would, retain a good deal of control of it. So that's really the only concern that I would have.
Well, I'm a union guy, and I noticed that you're PEP. The problem
Yes.
with Verizon is that they don't, the wired part of their network, the wired part of their corporation is unionized, but the wireless part isn't. And that's why they're pushing, I mean, that's my own theory, that they're pushing to do this wireless so they don't have to have union people doing it. So, and fiber will last 30 to 40, 50 years. So it's a big investment if that's what the commission decides to go with. Thank you again.
Okay, I just want to mention that Councilmember Alfredo Ballerin has joined us. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Robinson from council members? Councilmember Doche, are you waving your hand there?
I was trying to get to raising my hand the technical way, but my finger kept on landing on the wrong place.
Okay.
Mr. Robinson, thank you very much for your interest in this position. It's fascinating that you have done so much research in the past. Life changes quickly in the technology area. So I am wondering, and your paper is from 2015, I believe.
Yes.
I'm wondering how much updating of that research that you did is required and appropriate to evaluate the options, whether there's anything new on the horizon that makes municipal internet service a little bit more viable. And the other thing is you're employed full time, and I'm wondering how much time you have to devote to your service over the next 6 to 9 months on this.
Well, the second part of your question is probably easier to answer. I do work a, regular, 9 to 5 job. So, I generally am available, most, weekday evenings and such. Weekends if necessary. So, that generally is my availability. And, I do have some time, I can take off here and there if necessary. To answer your first question, I've actually, revisited this paper actually a few times and stuff. And I think I had written it in a way that, be more, have more of a general look at these items and stuff. I don't think the general ideas haven't changed too much. I think if there are any changes that would need to be made, it probably would be what would be considered, it would probably be the definition of high-speed internet and, what that would look like. One thing that would probably also be different is probably, the cost would be, for developing a municipal internet service, it probably was a lot more expensive to do, when I wrote this paper than it is probably now, but still is, a pretty, good price tag for, a city the size of Albany. I would also say that, you know, I think the politics have kind of, you know, shifted a little bit, you know, from when I had initially wrote it, because, you know, in 2015, you know, it still very much was, you know, okay, you know, how can, you know, local governments, you know, do more with less, and, you know, what, you know, scant resources can we provide to do this? Now we're looking at actually a, you know, possible infrastructure bill with, you know, the potential, you know, billions of dollars of federal investment into expanding, you know, broadband. So, you know, I would say that, you know, that could, you know, possibly be, you know, a difference between, you know, now and, you know, when I had initially, you know, wrote this paper.
Thank you. I just want to do a little follow-up question and just get a gut reaction on this question that I have in my mind. And that is, is there an economics of scale? So for a larger city, I'm wondering if there's a certain amount of the base cost that you have, no matter the size of the city, and then you know, with regard to administrative, sales, installation, etc., you know, whether the cost maybe per capita might be higher in a city that is smaller, like the city of Albany, or whether there's a benefit in us being a smaller city. And any, you know, I'm just curious about that kind of question. I'm looking for a gut reaction. I'm not going to hold you to it.
Oh, that's fine. I don't think I've really looked into it, large cities and stuff, because usually in large cities like New York City or, you know, Chicago or Los Angeles, you have multiple providers in an area and stuff. So, you know, there's competition. So those providers, you know, they have to be able to, you know, compete with one another. So you kind of have a little bit of control on the prices there. Most of the places that I've looked at that have developed, you know, municipal internet are kind of like, you know, mid to large, you know, sized, you know, cities, you know, ranging from, you know, about 50,000 to like, you know, 250,000. And as far as, you know, economies of scale, I mean, I think there is some of that, you know, built into it, because ultimately for something like, you know, say if we were to develop, say, a fiber optic broadband network, you know, yes, it would be best if you could get as many people subscribed to that as possible to make it, you know, more cost effective for the city. And, you know, I was actually just looking this up actually a few days ago. And, you know, what I've been seeing is that when you initially develop a municipal internet service, it does take some time. It does take a few years for it to gain enough traction so that, you know, for one, it can, you know, somewhat break even or not be as much of a financial burden to the municipality. And two, you know, you kind of want to see, you know, growth in that, because it allows it ultimately forces the existing, you know, telecom provider to be forced to compete. There was a municipal internet service in Colorado that, you know, basically noted that it took, you know, about, you know, 5 years for them to gain 50% of their city's market share as far as developing a subscriber base for their municipal internet service. And that basically forced their local cable provider, you know, I believe it was Comcast, to ultimately, you know, start lowering their prices so that, you know, there's really, you know, a benefit that's felt by everyone who subscribes to the service and everyone who doesn't subscribe to the service.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments by council members? Councilmember Ballerin.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And I want to thank you for taking your time and applying for this and be willing to volunteer your time on this commission. I do appreciate that. My question is actually a real simple one. in your research, did you see what was the price differences that municipalities were charging residents? Was it higher than the already existing company? And did they have the same speed levels as the existing companies have that are already in the game, for the say?
Generally, I've seen the prices for these municipal services to be a lot lower and the speeds greatly, higher. I mean, a lot of places they're, selling their, gigabit service, basically 1, gigabits of internet speed per second. They sell it for about, $60 to $70. And then you have lower tiered services like such as those that most people would need to say do a Zoom meeting or play a video game or watch YouTube videos. The prices are substantially lower, like say 100 megabits per second for like $10 to $15, which by comparison the new legislation that was signed capping, the internet prices for low-income homes, that only offers, I believe, 15 megabits per second. So it's generally substantially lower and, very much, better quality.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, Mr. Robinson, I want to thank you very much again for your willingness to apply for this position. We deeply appreciate it. It's very clear that you have a great interest in this area, and we thank you again, and we will be back in touch with you.
It's no problem. I appreciate all of your time.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
The next candidate is, would you like to start with them?
Yeah, yes, go ahead. And this is Andy Kyer. Welcome, Andy, to our planning committee meeting. I'm the chair, Kathy Fahey, and let's see here. We appreciate you interviewing for this position as commissioner, for commissioner of the Albany Commission on Municipal Internet Service. The mission is to research the feasibility, logistics, and financing of creating a municipally run, citizen-owned high-speed internet service that will provide internet speeds greater than what private companies currently provide and ensure service will be made available to every Albany resident and business. The Common Council will be appointing 5 individuals to the commission, and the mayor too will appoint 5 individuals to the commission. We had a series of interviews last week, and then our last interviews are this evening, and we'll be making a decision shortly after that. So we really appreciate you applying, and what we're going to ask you to do is briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you are interested in serving on the commission. And then we'll go around and ask some questions. And if you have questions also, you'll have an opportunity there as well. So welcome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And appreciate the welcome. Appreciate you all allowing me to be here. My name is Andy Kyer. Pronouns are he, him, and his. So maybe just a little bit about me and why, how I ended up here tonight, why I'm interested in serving on the commission. So I grew up in the Capital Region. I'm from Queensbury originally, and lived outside of the area for a number of years, working in the technology industry. And more recently moved back to the area, wanted to be in Albany with my partner. and continued to work as a remote employee in the technology industry. And sort of my interest in the commission is sort of twofold. I think this commission sort of sits at the intersection of two things that I feel passionately about, which would be, firstly, sort of the value of public goods and the ability to provide, internet access, publicly owned internet access to the city of Albany. That sort of fits squarely in that category. And I believe the use of something like municipal internet can allow us to achieve more equity in the city of Albany in terms of access to what is a pretty critical resource. And secondly, I'm passionate about the technology sort of generally. My academic background is in computer science. That's what I earned my degree in. And for the past 9 or so years, I've worked in various capacities as in software engineering and sort of technology consulting in various capacities. So although I don't have expertise on sort of municipal internet in particular, I think I could bring sort of a valuable technical background to the commission.
Okay, that's terrific. So we'll, a lot of us will have questions. Let's, anybody would like to start, council members? Questions for Mr. Kier? I'll start. One of the things I was very interested when I was reading your letter was that the impacts, I mean, we're dealing with franchise agreements right now with various wireless services and regarding bringing 5G into the city. And you made a comment about the impacts of 5G wireless on Albany. And maybe can you talk a little bit about, is that going to be enough, or should we still consider pursuing, broadband?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that's a great question. I think that it's something that deserves further research. Like, I don't want to pretend to have expertise in an area that I don't. I am familiar with 5G sort of in a broad sense and the impacts that it could potentially have. It's my understanding, as I've done a little bit of additional research, that oftentimes there's potentially overlap here where some of the infrastructure, the fiber infrastructure that municipalities would need to enable something like municipal broadband would also be useful for sort of the backbones required for 5G. So I don't necessarily, I guess my thought would be it's something that I think the commission should investigate a bit further and explore so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where, we make a significant investment as a city for 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road, it to be obsolete. My initial reading on that is very sort of top level, and it seems to indicate that would not be the case. But I certainly think it is worthy of some additional consideration and research to ensure that we're investing in what is going to be a long-term solution.
Okay, thank you. Other council members with questions or comments? Councilmember Ballerin.
I think Judy had her hand up first.
Oh, Judy.
No, that's right. I'm glad to let Alfredo go.
All right, you found your hand, I see. All right, right. Go ahead, Alfredo.
I just had a simple question. So this is good. First, thank you for taking your time and applying for these positions. I understand it's a volunteer position, and I think it's always great that we have so many residents that are willing to volunteer their time to serve on such an important commission. Can you give us a better understanding of how you are able to balance all your responsibilities? Because what we want, even though it is a volunteer commission, we want to make sure that people's commitments there, that they're going to make this a priority and that they're going to be able to attend the meetings and committees that have followed up part of being a member of the commission?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's a great question, and I think I thought very seriously in about, you know, whether or not this is something that I wish to pursue, because it is a commitment that I would take very seriously. It isn't something just that's sort of like an afterthought. You know, if I were appointed to the commission, it's something that I would be prioritizing and making sure that you know, that I'm able to be attending the meetings, because ultimately I think public service is incredibly important. I admire you all as public servants, and so should I step into that role, it's certainly something that I would prioritize and ensure that I'm, you know, committed to 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Doche.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your interest. Your credentials are impressive. I'm not a technology person. I use technology, sometimes more successfully than others, generally fairly successfully. Your background seems to be on the software end of things, which I don't know how much of that is really relevant to this particular issue. I'm wondering how much reading you have done on this topic in terms of what other municipalities have done, what the options are. We also had a report issued, is it 2 years ago, Kathy? I think in the city of Albany.
Even longer, I think
yeah.
2017, right. I thought.
Right, that talked about different options. So I'm wondering, you know, how much you've done on that, and how transferable or relevant is your software experience, other than clearly you are more comfortable with technology than I am.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I have done some, you know, somewhat limited research in terms of what this has looked like in other municipalities. I think like Chattanooga is sort of you may be familiar with, is sort of like was one of the originals. I think they put their system in place around 10 years ago. It's been a really big success, and, you know, more and more municipalities, I think, as a result of that, have looked into things. Longmont, Colorado was another city that was at least somewhat comparable in population size to Albany that I read a little bit about as well, and they've worked on that project a bit more recently. As far as like the transferability of the skills, I would say the honest answer is somewhat. You know, I have in undergrad have a, you know, basic understanding of computer networking and sort of the like fundamentals of how these things work. But I think the other piece of that is I am aware of like my limitations in that regard. Like I wouldn't sort of try to pretend to be something that I wasn't, but I could be able to help sort of guide the commission in terms of, hey, we should really consult with an expert in X, Y, or Z particular field, because this may be sort of outside the scope of what we as a commission are able to, you know, understand definitively. You know, I think, yeah, I think that's how I would sort of summarize things. I think the background in technology is certainly helpful, but at the same time, I don't want to overstate and act like I'm like a municipal broadband expert by any means.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to stop and mention that President Pro Tem Kelly Kimbrough is also here. So any other questions by council members, comments? It looks like we lost Joyce, huh? All right. Well, Mr. Kayer, we really appreciate that you took the time to interview with us today. And again, we'll be making our decision probably this evening, and we will be back in touch with you. We hope you have a great evening. So thank you very much for coming. And I should point out first though, Andy, did you have any questions you wanted to ask us?
Well, I mean, if we had a moment, I would be curious just to know, I know in terms of how you're all viewing like the structure and sort of commitment of the committee. I don't think that was really covered in the initial document that got put out. Is that something that's been decided or to be determined just in terms of like meeting cadence, frequency,
yes,
things like
that is going to be completely up to the commission to determine how often you meet and, who, if there's going to be a chairmanship position, we're going to leave that completely up to the commission. And you probably did read that we're going to be looking for a preliminary report within 120 days of the commission forming, and a final report within 150 days after the receipt of the preliminary report. Commission will end 6 months after the receipt of that final report. So it is a time limited thing, but it's up to you folks to determine how often you meet and so on and so forth.
Okay, understood. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, take care and thanks again.
All right, thanks for your time. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's see. The time is 6:17. Our next interviewee is Caitlin Monjo, and that's at 6:25. So we have a few minutes. JR, is she there by any chance?
No.
She's not, Madam Chair, but if you like, I can text her really quickly to see if she's able to jump on sooner.
That would be great. Thanks, Danielle.
She says she's going to join us momentarily.
Thank you.
I'm just having so much fun.
She's coming up.
Okay. Welcome, Caitlin. I'm Chair Kathy Fahey, Planning Committee, and we appreciate you joining us tonight and your willingness to serve on the commission, to interview to serve on the Commission on Municipal Internet Service. And thank you for joining us a little early. We're moving along a little more quickly than usual. Usually we're quite a bit late, but we're doing great tonight.
Great.
So, the mission of the commission is to research the feasibility, logistics, and financing of creating a municipally run, citizen-owned, high-speed internet service that will provide internet speeds greater than what private companies currently provide, and ensure service will be made available to every Albany resident and business. As you probably know, this is a 10-member commission. 5 members are appointed by the mayor and 5 are appointed by the council. What we'll expect of the commission is a preliminary report within 120 days of it being formed, and then a final report within the next 150 days after that preliminary report. The commission will cease to exist 6 months after we receive that final report. So what we're going to ask tonight is that you take a few minutes and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you are interested in serving on the Albany Commission on Municipal Internet Service. And then we'll go around and the council members will ask some questions. And you'll also have an opportunity to comment and ask questions yourself. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me. My name is Caitlin Monjo. I'm 36 years old. I'm an attorney and I work for Community Care Physicians PC as in-house counsel. I've spent my whole legal career as a healthcare attorney. Before I went in-house, I was in private practice. Most of my work involves compliance with technical legal things like HIPAA and high tech, which I gather we're all hearing a lot more about now than we're used to, but also fraud and abuse, public integrity, best practices, conflicts of interest, things like that. I'm married, I have 2 big dogs, a cat, and I live in an historic home in Hudson Park. So I think that's sort of the quick and dirty on who I am. I have plenty of weird niche interests that I'd be happy to talk more about, but for the Internet Committee, you know, the quality of the service available here has been kind of an irritant to me and many people I know for some time. I'm sure that's true of you as well. When friends of mine and I heard that there was a committee forming for this purpose, we were all sitting around like on a stoop over on J Street and like, all of us should apply for this because somebody should get on this committee to make sure, you know, they hear from us. So, you know, like many people, I've been working from home for the last year, which was not my norm. And the quality of the internet service that I can access is pretty low. And I have a lot of resources. I'm fortunate that I have those resources, but as I think I put in my cover letter, I found that I can't do my work when it comes to face-to-face just meetings with people if my husband, who has a job that has him working from home, is doing the same thing. And we have the most expensive internet we could buy. We have a mesh system. We've done all these things to try to make it work. And if we can't make it work, I don't know who can. So it's my feeling that competition is sorely needed. And I also think just internet service is a public good at this point. You need it to be able to do your job, to learn, to access crucial resources. You know, something that I think we overlook is the fact that a lot of times the way you get access to information about your community is online now. Many government agencies and entities put the most current information on Twitter first. Part of my job during the pandemic was monitoring the constant changes in executive orders, for instance, in the state of New York for healthcare providers. The actual best way for me to get that information was to stream the governor's, you know, daily briefing at 11:30 and keep an eye on Twitter. If I couldn't access those resources, I couldn't do my job effectively. And I think that's true for people who wanted to know about parking tickets, what was going on with their kids' school, and any number of other things. So, you know, I think it almost goes without saying that you need strong internet service to be able to do what you need to do as just a person in our community. I also took a look at the report that I believe the contractor is named Millennium. I'm probably using the wrong name, but there is a 2015 report that I gather, you know, the city's commissioned. So I'm aware that this is a longstanding issue that the city cares about, but I was sort of shocked to see that something like a third or a quarter of people in our community do not have quality internet access, maybe aside from a smartphone. You know, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. You know, it's shocked but not surprised maybe is the right inclination. It's just too expensive, frankly, particularly if you're having to make choices about what services you can afford and need to have. You know, if you're choosing to have your smartphone, you need it. There's no way to live for most of us without having a smartphone. You need to be able to do SMS and phone calls and other things. So if you're choosing between your smartphone and home internet, you're choosing your smartphone. And it makes a lot of sense to me why we have so many people in our community without quality service at home, but we're seeing the consequences of it now. I think I'll add to that something I've got maybe unique insight into is where our healthcare services are going in this space. So we were all in the middle of a crazy experiment in telehealth that happened because of COVID. And I can speak for, you know, the work I do at my company, which is an independent physician-owned practice here in the Capital Region. We're very large. We employ more physicians and non-physician providers than some of the hospitals. We had to pivot like this to get to telemed. And one of the things that we've noticed is even our providers, who some of them live in far-flung suburbs that are well-resourced, have a hard time getting quality internet, to say nothing of their patients who live all over the place. That sounds like a niche issue before, but during the pandemic, it was not a niche issue. This was important to all of us. You think about people who live in communities that are right in the middle of, you know, I could walk there from my house and can't get a good signal. That's shocking. But you know, okay, so let's say the pandemic is going away now, but reality is that this part of our healthcare infrastructure is going to stay. Right now, healthcare payers, including the public payers, are talking right now about keeping virtual healthcare through telemed, telehealth, behavioral health, keeping it, which most people want, they like it. But that means that we're going to start seeing healthcare plans that offer what's called virtual first. Virtual first means that your first stop at the doctor's office would be through a telemed visit. Most people like this, but if you don't have good internet at home and you're trying to just do it on your smartphone, you're going to have diminishing returns. I will add that there was a new rule that went into effect this year that gave enhanced electronic access to everybody to their medical records. If you don't have good internet, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that, nor will you be able to effectively manage, for instance, your child's healthcare in the same way. I just think that this is something that we're going to notice if we don't address sort of the divide between the haves and have-nots with internet. We're going to start noticing that people aren't, it's not just that they're not able to communicate, it's that they're not able to access crucial things like government services and healthcare. So that's sort of where I am on this. I'm aware that a lot of people who know a lot about this area have prepared a report, that people who you know, work in government have been at this sometimes. So I am here to come with a beginner's eye, but those are sort of the reasons why I decided to apply. Does that answer your question? And you're muted.
Thank you, Caitlin. So that's very helpful. So now I'll turn to other council members to see if they have any questions or comments. Okay, Councilmember Doche.
Thank you very much. Caitlin, thank you very much for your interest in this position. I appreciate your bringing, I think, a novel viewpoint to this discussion that is important, having taken advantage of some telemedicine options and having been a former attorney in the New York State Department of Health, knowing how we used to consider that taboo in some ways. My how the world change is when there is a real necessity. I look forward to us continuing, maybe keeping an open mind to a lot of different problem solving in our country, not only on the healthcare end, but also on the employment end. I think it can help our environment by having fewer people commute when it may not be necessary, and a whole host of other issues, including quality of life. As somebody who has a lot of experience in healthcare, I appreciate that background, but I know that I would come ill-equipped to really problem solve on this particular issue. And I'm curious about your perspective about what background that you have, that in terms of people really jumping in and saying, okay, so we understand the need and there's these different perspectives, but the bottom line is still we need an appropriate solution. We need recommendations for an appropriate solution. And I consider it like a super technical challenge nut to crack, to really look at the potential different options and then providing, we're really looking for the direction. Now, where do we go? And so I'm curious about your perspective for what you bring to the table to actually come up with problem solve and solutions.
Good question. So I asked myself that. So I'm a pretty solution-oriented thinker. You know, one of the things I do is in-house counsel as opposed to being on the outside is I'm often involved with sort of the business folks in the business, evaluating options before a problem happens. So I'm very well accustomed to being the person around the table who does not know the most about something. You know, I'm often talking to doctors about something that's they do for a living and I don't. But where I do have some skills that I think could be valuable, I'm pretty good at asking questions about really kind of meat and potatoes feasibility. How much does it cost? Does a solution box out other future solutions? Is it too difficult to implement? Would a regular person who you're talking to in your neighborhood understand how to do this? How many steps is too many steps for something? That is something I do all the time. And I think that, you know, probably the citizen component of a committee like this is at least in part sort of reality testing. I think I acknowledge on some level, you know, like I'm married to an engineer, I work with tech people all the time. So maybe I'm not necessarily the typical resident, but I think I understand enough to be able to ask questions about, you know, the big things that lead to sustainability, which to me is, you know, can we afford it? Can it be implemented in a timely fashion? What are the barriers that individuals would have to adopting? Those are probably the big things to me. You know, money, I'm sure is number one. And, you know, that based on the report that I read, there were huge number swings depending on whether there were tax credits available in programs. That is something I am comfortable doing, by the way, is reading the fine print on eligibility for programmatic type things like grants and rebates and that sort of thing. But totally there with you, or not congresswoman, but council member, that I do come with sort of an outsider's point of view. I do not have a hard tech background. I think that could be an asset, but if not, that's fine too.
Thank you. I appreciate, especially having sat around the table with a lot of doctors and laboratory personnel and people with, you know, masters in public health, et cetera. And it's great. I loved what I learned in that process and asking some of those questions and finding out sometimes I'm asking questions that are even better than I thought they were when I was asking them as somebody who was a novice in that. I do want to mention that I think one of the big questions that this group needs to also look at is what legal authority do we have with regard to getting competition? If we were to develop a municipal internet, do we need legislation passed by New York State Legislature? And if so, what does that legislation need to look like? Would it be a simple authority? Is it something else even beyond that? What level of regulation we would be subject to with regard to the Public Service Commission, what has the Public Service Commission, that's one of my big questions is, I have to think that some people in the Public Service Commission have been aware of the fact that some municipalities are looking at this. And then the question is, what is their role, and how much they potentially create additional hoops for us to jump through. And I do think that a lot of that is stuff that attorneys are used to dealing with and figuring out who to call and ask the right questions of. So I that is not something that you mentioned, but that is something that I do think that there is a great benefit to having somebody with a legal background on the commission looking at some of those kinds of issues. And thank you for your interest.
And that is something I would be comfortable doing. I'll add that I've only recreationally followed this sort of thing, but I know the Public Services Commission has come down hard on Charter Spectrum in the past in New York. So who knows, maybe there is some appetite for a little bit of municipal competition, but I take your point. That's a tough knot.
Okay, Council Member Ballerin.
Thank you. And thank you for taking your time to meet with us today, as well as being willing to volunteer on this commission. My question is a simple one. With everything you have going on in your life and your other responsibilities and your other commitments, are you able to make this a priority? Even though it is a volunteer position, it's a very important commission that we're putting together. And we want to make sure that people can attend the committees, the subcommittees, the informational meetings, and everything else that may be let out of this group. And is that something you think you can balance with your other responsibility?
Good question. I think it is. I am very sensitive to where I commit my spare time these days. So I'll give you the long and short and say that my job is pretty flexible. So the degree that there are meetings that are during business hours, that would be perfectly fine for me to attend, but absolutely this would be the first priority for my spare time. You know, the I guess extracurricular activities, if you will, that I'm engaged in. I'm a mediator. Those are things that are scheduled around other things, so that's not a conflict to me. Occasionally, there's a dog barking in my house, and that's about the only other big obligation that I have going on.
That's okay. I got 2 dogs, so I know how that can be. Right. Thank you.
Okay, Council Member Hoey.
Hi, Caitlin, and again, thank you for applying and being willing, being willing to serve on the commission. Listening to you, and I know it came up, I think it'd be great to have, somebody with the law background who, if it was necessary, would be able to do the research, even though this isn't your field, sort of, that you would be able to do, research, and if the commission needed, to get answers, you'd be willing to do that. And one of my questions was, but Councilman Ballerin already asked, would you be able to have the time? So, I appreciate that you signed up. I really think we do need at least one attorney on this commission, and I'll have to look at the, who applied and what their background is. Thank you for applying. And I really don't have any questions because you were very fluent. You explained stuff, where you were coming from. And I think having that personal problem with the internet, you understand it from, a person who lives in the city, you understand what the problem is. So thank you.
I dig it. I am I try to find a way to describe this about myself without sounding like negative, but I really dig research. I'm the kind that likes to go like all the way down into Judy is laughing because you're also a health attorney. Probably you got to go all the way into the regulation to make sure you got the most recent thing. So that is definitely in my skill set.
I kind of describe it as colleagues also know that about me.
Yeah. Some would call it rigid, some would call it whatever, but it works for me.
Okay, Caitlin, do you have any questions or anything else you wanted to share with the committee?
I don't think so. You know, I took a good look at that report, which was 2015. I think, you know, my sense is that this is sort of the next step in the process for kind of discovering what the city can really do. I think probably this is a fertile time for the city, just given, you know, I know that there's some money available from the feds, but also there's a renewed sense that we need people to be able to work at home, and we'd like people to live here. But I guess the question I have is, it's less in the can we do this or what could the city do conversation, but more in the how do you imagine this project working in tandem with some of the quality of life organizations we have around, like the BID or like other, I think of Downtown BID, I think of the Lark Street BID, but also our neighborhood associations, other stakeholders that are interested in making this a nice place to live. If it's a nice place to live and you work from home, you're here a lot, right? So I'm curious if this all fits in together, if this is, or well, if that piece fits in with this committee, or if that's further down the road.
Oh, well, I think that's a great question, and I'll give you my answer to that. This commission that we're forming really has an opportunity to make those decisions. I mean, if you think it's important to engage, our other civic organizations, go ahead. I mean, we are really looking for you folks to put on those creative caps and come up with answers here. You know, it's we don't have the answers, and we're hoping that you folks can pursue some of those possibilities, because you're right, we have a lot of resources here, and we're going to want the input, I think, of people who live here and work here, and so on and so forth. So any other council members want to respond to that at all? Alfredo.
Well, I think this is one piece of many pieces that we've got to put together as we reimagine our city and what we'd like to see it, and how we'd like to see it move forward, and how we'd like to see it redesigned and redeveloped, after the pandemic, and to be successful and flourish in this new environment, which is much more remote, which is much more tech savvy, which is much more, where people have more choices. You no longer, based on what we've had last year and a half, you no longer have to live in certain settings because of your employment. So people now choose where they want to live here now. And this is just one piece of many other pieces that we need to put together to make our city competitive as we look to the future.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'll add that I know only enough about what I'm about to say to be dangerous, so I wouldn't quote me, but I do know from colleagues of mine who work and rent space downtown that the quality of even the commercial internet services available in our downtown office buildings here in the city is not what you would expect, that it is not that high. And it is, a component of municipal internet. I'd have to wonder if it's providing some kind of commercial level service to some of our businesses. It'd be great if people could live and work downtown. I imagine there's a coming vacancy in office space crisis that's going. I think I'm seeing this in my job. And a medical office space is a different animal, but I think it's the sense that there's going to be a lot of vacant commercial space that's just too large that will need to be subdivided. So it's possible we might see smaller businesses wanting to locate downtown. It'd be great if there were a high quality internet that we could offer them as well, but who knows? That certainly bears more research.
Okay, Caitlin, we want to thank you very much for taking the time to interview for this position. Very much appreciate it, and we'll be back in touch with you. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you all do. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, is our last interviewee is Lavonda Collins. Is Lavonda here yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so we got a few minutes. Okay.
Did anybody get flooded with that rain yesterday?
No?
Okay, good. I saw downtown Albany was, you know, it looked like you needed a boat.
Does anybody know where that was? Was that the bottom of Sheridan Avenue?
Yes, it was bottom Sheridan Avenue.
Chronic problem from when I lived there. Not there, but in Sheridan Hollow, generally.
And isn't the issue partly that that was one of the streams coming through there originally?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not
like
that
Hackett, like Hackett.
Like Hackett.
Right, and like the area that Reichman and Hanson down Warren and Park, etc., down Myrtle Avenue, yeah, to where Albany Med is. Yeah, each one of those streams are pretty reliable areas to still expect flooding.
Unfortunately, when we have these 500 floods.
Sheridan Hollow has been one of the most significant, because I think that unlike some of these other streams that you might get flooding upstream a little bit more, Sheridan Hollow is pretty much a straight run downhill, with unabated. And they did do a lot of work behind the Albany pump station, I think 2 years ago, that was supposed to help with that. And they've been doing digs and adding in different stopgap measures, but continues to be a challenge.
Oh.
I just reached out to the 645 candidate and they're having technical difficulties. So I'm going to turn my camera off and then attempt to help them get on.
Okay, thank you, Danielle.
Oh, she's having internet difficulties. Or is it just technical difficulties? I don't know.
So Tom, can you see the game at this point?
It's actually practice, but yeah, I'm looking down the field. I can't recognize which one he is, but I'm just watching it. At least it's not too hot. I mean, we have a nice breeze here. It's sunny.
Oh, that's good. It's supposed to cool off.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of rain coming up, I think.
You know, my two sons were both played on the varsity at the Albany High School for soccer.
Well,
it's a great game.
Okay. I hope he gets in. He starts Albany High in September. So they did do away with the sports, as you probably know, or some of the modified. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a shame. Those feeder programs are so important in our youth soccer program. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, the things are open up. They're letting them, having to wear a mask during a game is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But they're loosening up on that now, but it's taken forever. And actually, we thought he'd go to school on Monday without the mask, but they changed their mind. They said now, though, he can go outside without the mask.
Yeah.
But he's had his first vaccine, and next Wednesday he's due for the second shot. So, but he's already had COVID too. So, it's tough. Yeah. He had no symptoms. He was just, the whole family, myself, my wife, and him, had. I was the first one. The university detected me, and then I had my wife and him tested, and they were both positive. So I'm just worried about this new variant that they're talking about. I think it came from India, and they said it's like 40 or 50% more contagious and a lot rougher. But they think the vaccine will work on it.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. Fortunately,
the problem is that if people all don't get vaccinated, that another variant could come up that, the vaccine won't help.
Agreed. And I think that's, I know people who are not letting their guard down, they're still isolating, they're still wearing masks, just because they're not sure. Okay, we all set, Danielle?
Sorry to interrupt. Ms. Collins will not be joining us tonight, so I guess we could begin the deliberation process for the candidates that have come before the council.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to go into executive.
Can I get clarification? Is it that she was having technical difficulties with the video, and can we interview her just via audio, or is it
so
that
I would normally be setting all of that up behind the scenes, but we were having a conversation that I'll disclose maybe once we go into executive session if the motion happens, or I can send an email offline.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Second on the motion to go to executive session.
Okay, and that motion
It's articulated particularly.
That motion is to go into executive session to discuss the appointment of various individuals to the Municipal Internet Commission. And Tom, you seconded.
Second again.
All right,
yep.
Thank you very
Second
much.
Again.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
1 second before we start the live stream, start recording.
It's up. It's up and running.
Okay. All right. Our interviews are completed for tonight, and I wanted to thank everyone for your participation, and I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Motion by Alfredo, second by Tom Hoey.
Tom.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
My battery's almost dead.
We made it.